Hi and welcome to this week's Life Lessons video. It's great to be back with you all. This week we're talking all about eco-anxiety, which is a growing emotional health issue for many of our clients. Do you have feelings of overwhelm, hopelessness, anxiety or depression when you watch the news or read in the media about climate change problems, environmental problems, and potential ecological disasters? If so, this video is for you. We're going to be exploring what is eco-anxiety, what are the signs and symptoms, and what causes it. And most importantly, we'll be offering you some practical tips and advice so you can begin to help yourself right now. Welcome to our Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons series. In each episode, we answer your questions, reveal the powerful life lesson, and offer you lots of practical tips and advice to help you live in balance, harmony, and flow. Okay, David, so when a client comes to you, as I know they are increasingly are, with this eco-anxiety, what are the typical signs and symptoms they're telling you about?
Well, being consumed, I would guess that their mind is just focusing on this one issue, and mainly because in the media, on television, on the radio, on newspapers, every form, that's basically all you hear. So they create a red light feeling because they see the reality of the situation. And then constantly it's getting reinforced, which means that their mind becomes more and more focused on this one subject. So the physical manifestations of this is poor sleep, not being able to get off to sleep, rolling it around is in their mind, waking up in the middle of the night. You know, we call it the 3 a.m. mind. Have you ever had the 3 a.m. mind? You wake up and then you can't get back to sleep because you're rolling around all of the problems. And then it takes on more and more of your day because you see constant reminders of it, litter around the place, plastic around the place, you know, and it's a constant, it's like somebody rubbing at a sore. It's constantly going on all of the time.
The idea of the sore, I suppose some people will experience this eco-anxiety as almost like an ongoing, relatively mild background worry or concern. Other people who are really in the cycle of concern about the eco issues and not controlling the emotions, they are experiencing a sense of panic, almost like a panic attack.
Yep, definitely, because you see on the news they keep on giving these dates. We've only got 20 years, 20, 30, 40 years to save the planet. And for a very sensitive person, what that's doing, it's keep on kind of triggering all of the time. And so this is why it's very important to have this talk with you, because you can't stop the external. How many videos have we talked about? We can't stop the media talking about it or being more realistic. We can't stop the triggers. So the only thing you can control is yourself.
I think as well, David, if anxiety and panic are one kind of result of being very concerned about these issues, some people are talking about having anger or feeling hopeless or desperate, that there's nothing they can do, and then that in turn creates a feeling of despondency and depression and a hopelessness.
Well, the one word you haven't used, which I would use, the one you just used, is hopelessness. Yeah. They have a sense of hopelessness that little old them all by themselves can't stop this national and international and world and universe disaster. So what can they do? So they have a big sense of hopelessness. You know, funny enough, because I have a sense of deja vu about this. Through my career, this reminds me so much as early in my career when I was working with a lot of clients about the nuclear attack. Do you remember the Cold War and the threats of, the East and nuclear war and nuclear bombs? This used to be a constant thing that I would be working with my clients, because it's in the news, it's talking about it, it's constantly happening, and then people get hooked into the story. And this to me is very similar to this idea, because it's the number one news. You look at the news today. First story. I read this morning, first story was about the climate and about how long have we got to change it. One report says 30 years, one report says 50 years. And so it's constantly, it's like a trigger all of the time. And if you're not aware of this, and if you're not in control of your emotions, and so this is why it falls into the Wu-Wei model. Remember, try and say on each video to remind you, you are the creator of your emotions, not the victim. Second one more applies to this one. You control your mind. Your mind does not control you. And so when we come on to the things you can do, it's about being in control of your mind and not letting external trigger you. The way that I would like you to consider, as we get on, we'll think about this more, is being an optimistic realist. So we have to be realistically, of course. I'm not saying to bury your head. I'm not saying to swing from one side to the other, as Alex said, to be overly anxious, be number one item in your mind. And I'm also not asking you to forget about it, whistle a happy tune, burn up more fossil fuels, buy a bigger car. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there must be a Wu-Wei. That's the title of our videos. There must be that middle way where you can be an optimistic realist.
I think, David, a lot of people would balk at the kind of concept of being optimistic about our ecological future if we are to believe, some of the messages that are coming through from the scientific studies.
If we believe all of the messages.
But I guess it's about not letting the emotions that you are, would you say, are a natural reaction, a certain amount of red light emotions of concern, of engagement in these issues, of wanting to do something about it, is a natural and authentic reaction. I think the problem comes, though, when we allow the emotions and the thinking and the thoughts and the worst case scenarios to consume us, then it does overwhelm us. It does stop us from enjoying what we have now. It does stop us from taking positive, affirmative action to do something about these issues.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And we sometimes get feedback when people misunderstand the teaching and they believe that I'm saying that you shouldn't have emotions or emotions are bad. And I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying emotions, appropriate emotions, are one of your greatest assets. But remember, you are the creator of those emotions. So if your emotions, as Alex said at the beginning, reading the headlines, I am overwhelmed by emotions, never forget the basis of the teaching. You are creating those emotions. And so this is time for you to be concerned. Absolutely. This is real. This is not made up. So you have to take the appropriate action that you think is appropriate. And I'm going to go back. Optimistic realist. This doesn't mean to say you're going to whistle a happy tune and be optimistic, because the other word is being realistic. But also, don't focus on just the negative outcomes, because this is exactly what we call the human-centered mind. You may call the ego, but particularly that part of the mind that we call the inner child. The inner child, remember, again, say it in most videos, the inner child wants to be protected, to be safe, to be in control, to have known outcomes. And when it keeps on hearing these messages in the news, the inner child part of your mind basically gets paralyzed with fear, because all you're seeing is the negative outcome. I always think about it like a light beam. Instead of the light beam being wide and you can see all possibilities, the light beam becomes narrower and narrower and narrower until you only see one possibility, which is disaster. And so if you keep on focusing on disaster, on bad outcomes, on poor outcomes, then you're activating your belief system because that's all you're believing. It's like walking around saying, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed. And that's what's going on in your mind. That is one possible outcome. Absolutely. Realistically, that's one possible outcome. But we're not saying it's going to be the outcome. Thank goodness we didn't have nuclear war. If we were having this conversation 35 years ago when I was speaking to my clients, they would guarantee me, some of my clients would guarantee me, they were building cellars for nuclear war. But we couldn't say, oh, that's ridiculous. That's not going to happen. That is one possible outcome, but there are other outcomes.
So I guess what you're saying, David, that point you make about the inner child, and of course the inner child within us, with that part of our mind that wants to know what's going to happen, wants to be safe, doesn't want bad things to happen, wants everything to run smoothly. When we read as adults these messages coming back to us about the scientific studies, the reports, also the possible exaggerations in some parts of the media about what may or could or might or should happen, the inner child hooks onto that. Absolutely. It's like a red light, a warning system saying, oh no, this is going to be a problem. And then that part of our mind scrabbles around and tries to think, well, I've got to sort this out. I've got to control it. And of course, we can't control it. We can only do what we can do, and we can come onto that. But as individuals, we cannot have a huge, massive impact as a single individual on a global issue. And also we can't control unknown outcomes. And so I guess we have to teach that life lesson to the inner child.
Exactly. And that's what it is. In our system, it's a life lesson. And it makes me wonder, because whether the media is almost designed to stimulate and activate the inner child. I don't know where you live, but where we live is in the UK. There's been so many times a good news newspaper has tried to launch. I think I can remember about 10 times, and they never work. Why? Because our minds are designed to keep ourselves safe. We want to hear bad news and bad scenarios and what could happen. And as Alex said, that's the spiritual teaching that we have to teach our child, the reality of the situation. And the reality, yes, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it can't happen. But I am saying I am not guaranteeing you it will happen. That is one of many scenarios. Go back to my analogy of the beam. Instead of focusing just on negativity, just widening it out and saying, well, that's one possibility, but there is other possibility. For instance, we could quite easily come up with a technical, a logical fix. We're doing it now with electric cars. I mean, 5, 8, 10 years ago, the thought of an electric car working and being usable was laughable. Now we're getting quite close to it. That's just one thing. And there's many areas where we're changing the way wind and solar power. Look at energy. We've got the greatest form of free energy up there, the sun. We've just got to learn the technological way of how to use that, you know. And so I have great faith in us as human beings, spiritual human beings, our inventiveness, our way of finding answers all through life. We thought the Industrial Revolution would be the end of everything, and we find a way through. So that's what I would want you to consider, is along with a doomsday scenario, also think of the ingenuity of us as a human race. We've always solved our problems. And that's what I would say about being an optimistic realist.
Yeah, and I think as well, David, I suppose the ancient Taoists would teach us that as well as human beings being very resourceful, resilient, flexible, creative in coming up with solutions, so is nature. So nature nature, we are part of nature, and really nature adapts and copes and resets where necessary. It regenerates. Now, we're not saying that this is okay, what's happening and everything, but it's about having a bigger picture understanding in terms of possibilities and outcomes. Now, David, one thing I wanted to ask you about was, would you say that for highly sensitive people, so most of our clients are highly sensitive people who are very intuitively connected to nature, to the surroundings, to other people, sense of community. They have that stronger kind of connection to their environment. Yes. Would you say that this eco-anxiety is more of an issue for highly sensitive people?
Yes, I would. That's my personal empirical observations, and it's because they're not using, we did a video a few weeks ago called Your Superpowers. They're not using their sensitivity in the correct way, and these triggers, these things overwhelm their sensitivity. They misunderstand sensitivity as a weakness instead of a superpower. But if you are a sensitive person, you have to understand that sensitivity and be able to use it correctly, as in the right way. Again, mainly for sensitive people, they will narrow this down to worst case scenarios because they're not controlling their beliefs, their thoughts. They believe they are a victim. They are on the receiving end. And when we want to teach them, it's the other way around. That sensitivity is your superpower. So it might be worth watching that video.
Yeah, I will put a link to that video for you. I think, David, I guess the key message in terms of the signs and symptoms and causes is that it's perfectly natural to have concerns, and those concerns to raise some red light emotions for you.
Yes.
The trick is to not let the concerns escalate so much that the red light emotions paralyze you, stop you from taking rational action.
Yes.
So the first step, as you've already spoken about, really is be mindful not to get overly fixated on the worst case doomsday scenario.
Yes.
Now, when we say that, we're not saying pretend that's not going to happen. All we're saying is widen the beam out in terms of the possibilities of potential outcomes. So rather than letting the human-centered mind fix only on the worst case scenario doomsday outcome in whatever kind of eco issue particularly concerns you, or whatever area concerns you, spend time thinking about, okay, so what are the possible other outcomes? So that could be right at the opposite end of the spectrum, so being excessively optimistic, but also the optimistic realist outcomes, the neutral outcomes, and just have an appreciation, because at the end of the day, we do not know. There is no certainty over outcomes. No. There never will be, whether we're talking about climate change issues, ecological issues, or any other life issues. There's no certainty.
Absolutely.
And we have to teach that to our inner child, because our inner child will want to hold on to the very worst doomsday scenario and assume that is ultimately guaranteed as to what's going to happen. And of course, if we run with that, no wonder we have a sense of overwhelm, helplessness, depression, because we're buying into that story as if it's a reality, and we don't know the reality. So,
and just to say though, Alex, we call it life lessons, and in this video and other videos, this is one of the fundamental core life lessons you have to teach that part of your mind that we are calling or labeling the inner child. You cannot have certainty. You cannot control the future. That's very important and a massive life lesson to understand. And if you take anything away from this video, even if this subject isn't relevant to you, it is very relevant to find that part of your mind that we call the inner child and sit with yourself in a meditation to learn that lesson. You can't control the unknown. We live in the unknown. No one can give you guarantees about anything. No one can give you a guarantee that the future is going to be wonderful, utopian, Disney World, everything's going to work out fine. Don't worry. And no one can guarantee you it's a doomsday scenario. And you have to find that middle way that we call Wu Wei, effortless effort, living in your flow, being true to yourself, being honest. I would call it optimistic realist. So being realistic, but looking optimistically to solve the problems, not to be overwhelmed by the problems. That's what I mean by being optimistic, not being poor me. I am the victim. I can't do anything about it, because you can do something about it.
And I think, David, in terms of what we can do about it, the second thing really that I know you advise your clients on is basically talking about it, because a lot of people, I would imagine, when they have all these emotions and these thoughts and these concerns running around their head and getting amplified, they internalize it. They don't share it with anyone else. But that's almost the worst thing you can do. So I guess...
Well, it's because that's narrowing the beam, Alex. And just talking about it, or even bringing it up in our Facebook community group, widens the beam, because you're hearing other people's point of view. And you might hear an absolutely unrealistic optimist and say, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. But all that's doing is widening your view. It's telling you, it's triggering you. There are more than one outcome here. There are more than one. And the solution, I would almost guarantee you, the solution to this hasn't even been invented yet. I think it will come in the next 5 years or so. That's my own opinion. I think there'll be a solution to this coming in the 5 or 10 years that we don't even know about yet. But talking to other people, as Alex says, sharing with other people, listening to their point of view, is widening the beam, so you can widen your pointers of reference rather than just referencing on doomsday.
Yeah, and I think when we say talking to other people, so that could be a trusted friend, a trusted therapist, in an online forum, a local community group, just so you can share and discuss your ideas and get them from out of your head and verbalize them. And that kind of shifts the energy a bit, the pent up energy. And for some people as well, they find journaling very helpful, because when your mind is all confused and your emotions are racing and you have that feeling of overwhelm, just starting to write out your thoughts on the issue will help you make sense of it, will help give you some clarity.
How about doing a blog? Start your own blog. It's free. You can do it. Very easy to do. If this is you and you like writing, just start your own blog, and you get people commenting on your work and what you think, and giving you different points of view. You know, in our work, we love it when you come and give us a different point of view, because that's widening the discussion.
And the third thing, David, which I think is particularly important, is often, I mean, these ecological issues and the climate change issues and the environmental issues, they are at a global scale. So this global scale can feel overwhelming to the individual in terms of, what can I do? How can I help? And then that causes a lot of people to just give up and shut down and say, oh, this is hopeless. But actually, if we can begin to take affirmative action for ourselves
and our
family in terms of just the choices we make, in terms of what we eat, where we shop, where we go on holiday, how we travel, those sorts of things all collectively will make a difference.
Well, to confirm that, this morning in that story I told you about, I was listening to the news. The biggest supermarket in the UK has now come out and said within 3 years they are going to be polythene, the polythene they wrap around food, free. And why they're doing that is response from their customers. So you are important, and you are important to make choices, and you are important to write to your MP. It is important for you to write to your MP, to speak to write to your supermarkets to say, I do not want plastic. I do not want this. I want that. Start shopping at shops where they don't use plastic. And then pretty soon, big business will see this, and like this morning, they will change. They will change immediately. You have got that power. And can I tell you, one of the biggest powers you've got if you're in a family is your children. Talk to your children about it, because it's their future. Speak to them about it and make sure they understand that they can do things as well, that they can make changes in their environment, in what materials they use, how they go to school, can they walk a little bit farther. All these little things that seem insignificant, all mounting up, is so significant. How do you change the universe? Here's a Taoist saying: how you change the universe? You change your country, you change your town, you change your house, you change your family, and you change yourself. It all starts with you. You are awesome. You are part of the universe, not apart from it. You can make a change now, even if it's just not buying something or telling your supermarket you're not going to buy because it's covered in polythene, or you don't want a plastic straw. Just start doing that now.
And I think, David, the key message of this video is really to move from a place of eco-anxiety where your emotions are out of control, where they're overwhelming you, where they're stopping you from taking positive affirmative action, to a place of eco-action where you can do something, where
an eco-warrior
where you can make a difference, and using that energy and enthusiasm and concern and passion that you have for the environment in a positive way. So I really hope this video has given you some tips and advice. If this is an issue that's important to you, or if you have any takeaway ideas from the video, please comment below. We'd love to hear from you. As I said, David works with clients on these sorts of issues every day. And if you're interested in working with David one-to-one, I will put a link in the description below with more information. We produce new videos every week, so please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye-bye.